In July, I think it's fair to say that both you and I were a bit baffled by the decision of the new Chancellor, very new Chancellor at that point, Rachel Reeves, to remove the winter fuel payment from all those pensioners who are not on benefits. Have you got any better idea of what they were thinking, or at least now what are they thinking about what to do next?
Well, look, Rachel Reeves has been, probably with Keir Starmer, the most significant political architect of Labour's resurgence in the last 1 or 2 years and winning the election. And she's very skilled, and she will know how important it is for her to be tough about the fiscal rules and the macroeconomy. I don't think there was an imperative for immediate action to close the in-year numbers, but I do think she will have been given a list of things. You've got to do one of them. I think she's probably, in retrospect, quite annoyed at the Treasury for pushing her into an immediate decision like this. She may have felt as though, in retrospect, it was bad advice, and she'll be acutely aware of the politics because the reality is this isn't just a storm in a teacup. This is one of those big cut-through issues which has real momentum. It unites the left and the right, and that is where the politics bites for a new Labour government. And I think if you're Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, on the one hand, after the last few years, they have to be for order in government, for not having chaos and kind of flip-flopping decisions. But they also have to be conscious of how political momentum works in government. And, it's not impossible that you just put your chin out and see this through. But I'm not sure that I can think of examples in the last 20 years where governments have got away with just sticking out their chin and seeing something through, which has this kind of backlash, cross-party response, and where it kind of goes to the core issue for a party, which is it fair? And so the vote next week is a staging post, but I don't think it's the end of the story. And the question is, how do Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves respond?
The problem with this is the very first thing the new government, after 14 years of Conservative governments and coalition governments, the first thing the Labour government did, and it's the first thing that Rachel Reeves did as Chancellor in July. And so it's not straightforward. I think that general advice, the sort of Dennis Healey advice from the 1970s, when you're in a hole, stop digging, i.e. get the U-turn done. It's embarrassing. There'll be bad headlines, but you've sort of lanced the boil, and the quicker you do it, the better you are off, usually in politics. Does not always apply, because sometimes U-turns can be so significant that they go to the kind of core of the stability of the government. Now, I don't think there's any suggestion that's the case here, but it does go to the kind of core of the relationship between the Treasury and Number 10, because it'll cause sort of friction in that relationship, and Number 10 thinking like, hold on, no one told us about this. We were not politically cited on this. We've got weeks now before this budget of headlines like that. And, it is a big challenge for Rachel Reeves because she's the new chancellor, and it was her call. She can say to the civil servants and her political advisors, well, I wish I'd, why did you push me into this corner? But, ultimately, of course, it was her decision.
I think there are kind of three choices for how Rachel Reeves and the Treasury now respond to this. The first one is to say, it was our first decision. Our credibility depends on it. We're just going to front it out and say, this is what we mean by tough choices. The problem with saying that we're just going to front it out is that the backlash is, but why should it be poor pensioners or poorer pensioners who are the people who are first in line to make a sacrifice? So I don't think that she will think it's wise simply to put her chin out and see it through, although there'll be people saying, be a tough chancellor. The second thing she can do is try and do an offsetting spend. The cost of those things, it's the worst of all worlds because people don't forget the decision you've made, which is taking away something that they like in a way which they perceive as unfair, but the cost of trying to make up the lost ground goes into the billions. The third option is to say, and to be, and both Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have been very careful about this. They've always said it was about the in-year black hole this year. And they've always said, this is not a decision we wanted to make. They've never said, as a matter of principle, poor pensioners shouldn't be getting the winter allowance. And so if they can find money from somewhere else, let's say they do have
Well,
a
make it a
one-off
kind of
discovery.
one-off, like a
No, well,
one-off.
well, I mean, that was the justification. The black hole is in the ear. Let's say they can find £1.5 billion, which they didn't think was there, from somewhere else, like you did over the Swiss tax deal, like you did over mobile phone auctions. Say there's a case settlement, a case settles, which has a kickback for the government, and they can say, "Great news! We always said
I
we'd
think you're
raise the
being
1.5 billion, and let us take the money which we weren't expecting from there, and not have to go ahead with the winter allowance." That is a third way out, which they may think about.
it's a mess, isn't it? I mean, that's the conclusion of all of these options. None of them are attractive. They either end up costing you more money, you look weak. I think it speaks to I would say going into the political autumn, there's a kind of bigger story here, which is obviously you have a brand new government. The Tories are in a mess, got a huge majority, but there's not a kind of great feel good feeling about the government at the moment. Don't get me wrong. It's still very early days, but it's not quite working in the way it should. And I would think if you were Keir Starmer, the way you'd want it to be working at the moment.
Look, if you're Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and your teams, you'll be looking at the polling, you'll be looking at the focus groups. They will be saying, this is a big problem and it's going to get worse. I don't think you can just plow on. I don't think you can do a U-turn. But what they need is an escape route. I don't think carrying on with it and throwing loads of money at it is hugely attractive from a treasury point of view or from a political point of view. That may end up being what they do. But I think I would be thinking creatively.